What if you could see the exact moment a spacecraft was doomed? Watch it happen in real time on a launch camera, and still not know whether you were watching a catastrophe. That is not a hypothetical. It is precisely what happened to the engineers reviewing Columbia's launch footage on January 16, 2003. The foam impact on the left wing was visible, documented, and debated for 16 days, while the crew above them completed experiment after experiment in orbit, unaware that the question of their survival was already open. 82 seconds after liftoff, a chunk of insulating foam broke free from the external tank and struck the leading edge of Columbia's left wing. The piece was roughly the size of a small suitcase, traveling at several hundred miles per hour relative to the orbiter. The launch cameras caught it, blurry, brief, undeniable, a dark shape crossing the frame and disappearing into the wing. What it left behind was invisible to every sensor Columbia carried. And so the engineers did what engineers do when certainty runs out. They pulled the footage into conference rooms and started arguing about what they were actually seeing. Inside the orbiter, 7 astronauts were running 83 experiments and living the mission they had trained years to fly.
Rick Husband and his crew had no reason to believe anything was wrong. Nobody had told them otherwise. Down in Houston, engineers had pulled the launch footage and found the foam strike almost immediately.
A chunk roughly the size of a briefcase, hitting the leading edge of the left wing.
The images were blurry, the angle was bad, and the damage was genuinely hard to read from what the cameras had captured.
3 separate requests went up through the chain, asking for better imagery. Satellite reconnaissance, a closer inspection pass, and each one was quietly set aside before it reached anyone with the authority to act. The reasoning that killed those requests wasn't carelessness. It was history. Foam had struck the shuttle on dozens of previous flights, and every single one of those orbiters had come home.
That pattern had become a kind of institutional permission, a way of reading new risk through the lens of old survival.
Pattern had become a kind of institutional permission. A way of reading new risk was whether this strike had punched through the reinforced carbon panels protecting the wing's leading edge. The crew photographed protein crystal growth and filmed fluid behavior in microgravity, while that question sat open, unresolved, 16 days long. At 8:15 in the morning, Columbia's crew fired the orbital maneuvering engines for exactly 2 minutes and 38 seconds.
That single burn bled enough velocity to pull the shuttle out of orbit and aim it toward Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
The crew ran through their checklists the same way they had run through every checklist for 16 days, methodically, professionally, without alarm. At entry interface, roughly 400,000 feet above the Pacific, Columbia hit the upper atmosphere traveling at 17 times the speed of sound. Plasma formed around the airframe almost instantly, a sheath of superheated gas hot enough to vaporize steel. And for the next several minutes, the crew would be completely cut off from the ground. The left wing's reinforced carbon leading edge was the first surface to meet that gas, and somewhere inside it, a hole the size of a dinner plate was waiting. Superheated air found that opening, pressed through it, and began consuming the wing from the inside.
At 8:44 in the morning, Columbia crossed the California coast at Mach 18, trailing a bright plasma tail visible from the ground. Sensors inside the left wing began failing in sequence. Hydraulic line temperature, then tire pressure, then the landing gear itself. Mission Control read the anomalies aloud to Commander Rick Husband, calm and procedural, because that is what the protocol asked for. Husband acknowledged the last transmission, and then Columbia stopped answering. Over the Texas sky, superheated air had found the breach that foam tore open 16 days before, and the shuttle came apart at 200,000 feet. The investigation found two causes: a piece of foam and an institution that chose uncertainty over action. Engineers had suspected the damage within hours of launch, and the shuttle was already lost before most of them reached their desks that morning. 16 days of science, of sleep, of meals and laughter aboard that orbiter, and none of it changed what happened 82 seconds after liftoff.